Hello. Is this thing on? Okay, we're good. Okay. Thanks for coming out to Signal. I got to say that Twilio hackathons and the support of their evangelists and everybody awesome at Twilio is one of the reasons that I took the dive into starting my own company. So I definitely blame them for everything that happened that I'm going to detail in this talk. I'm also going to be giving this talk next week for Career Day to a bunch of 6th graders, so y'all are definitely my trial run here on this. So I'll be judging how you respond to some of the jokes, knowing if I have to change it for 6th graders. What you're looking at right now on the screen is a picture of a page on whitehouse.gov during the State of the Union live stream. So there was a YouTube live stream at the top, and what you can see in the bottom left corner there is a poll powered by my company, Wedgies.com. And what I'm going to talk about today is let you know what it took to get that poll embedded on the White House page and have it work for 150, actually for like 2 million people that saw that and voted on it. So 2014 was a pretty good year for Wedgies. And when I say for Wedgies, I mean Wedgies.com, which is a real-time polling voting platform. We power polls across websites, social networks, and apps. We're powering more votes per month at the end of 2014 than we did in the entire year of 2013. So we were kind of enjoying that success. But my co-founder and I were sitting around my dinner table with my kids and my wife, talking about 2015 and wondering how we were going to top what we'd done in 2014, when my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, and I saw my co-founder do the same thing, and my wife rolled her eyes. And we both checked our email at the same time, and then we looked at each other because we had just both read an email that came through our contact form. You know, the kind of crappy contact form you put on your website that has like 3 lines that people can put text into. Somebody from the White House had filled out that contact form with a very long email. So the next thing on our task list is actually to make that contact form bigger. But they had typed in about 20 lines of text into that contact form asking if we could jump on the phone and talk about powering polling for an upcoming event they had. And the signature and the footer was from the White House. We didn't think it was a prank. We were just super excited. So we jumped on the phone with them. And long story short, we agreed to power polling for the State of the Union. And their project was to set up a page like this that had units of content that would be populated during the State of the Union. And they wanted some of those content pieces to be quizzes and polls. And I'm guessing the contractor they were using wasn't going to have it done in time, because this was 30 days before the State of the Union. And they were contacting a third-party vendor to make this happen. So this began kind of an epic sprint for us to prepare and handle not only these features, but also the traffic the State of the Union was going to generate. So the goal of my talk here is not to talk about Wedgies so much as it is to provide a outline and a blueprint for anybody that needs to scale their system in a short amount of time to handle, an exponential increase in traffic. So I'm going to walk you through the steps that we did to prepare for that and talk about how you can apply that to your own, hopefully great opportunity. So the first thing you have to do in preparing for an event like this, especially the traffic increase, is you need to have a goal. And for us, the White House told us that they had anticipated having 150,000 concurrent users on site at any given time that we needed to handle. Now, if you've done any measuring of metrics and stats, 150,000 concurrent users is not actually something you can really measure. So we went about trying to figure out how to break this down into something that we could actually measure and test against. But the first step is to have a goal, and you need to write that down, and you need to aspire to hit that with every move you make. So the next step is you need to break down your goal into metrics that you can actually measure. And this is just kind of an example of the math that we use to figure out what we were going to measure to hit our goal and how we would know if we actually hit our goal. So we knew that the White House was going to be putting Wedgies on a page on their website, our polls, via iframe. We didn't know how many. We didn't know, really how much traffic or how they were going to get the traffic there. We didn't even know what it was going to look like. But we knew that if they had 150,000 concurrent users per minute, which was an important distinction we had to make, we had to clarify if it was per minute or per second. We knew that each one of those users would load a poll and how many requests to our web API that was, and the same for voting. And we knew from our own data that not every person that sees a poll votes on a poll. And we also assumed that multiple polls would be loaded on one page. And so we estimated that the number of requests per minute we would have to handle to service that traffic was going to be around 100,000 requests per minute. And then we multiplied that by 20% and added it on top. So our goal ended up being 120,000 requests per second sustained for over an hour that we needed to hit. And that was nowhere close to what we were able to do at that moment. So the next thing I did was assemble the A-team. So we needed help. There's no way we could do this on our own. There were just 3 of us working there at Wedgies at the time. And I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of very talented engineers over my career. And so I started calling them up, asking if they were in for a secret mission. And I found 3 people that were willing to help. So we not only had to prepare for this scaling challenge, but we actually had to write a new feature, too, that the White House wanted to use. We were pretty upfront about the fact we didn't have it at the time, so it's not like we lied or anything like that. But we needed to do some customizations for them. So I called up people I'd worked with in the past and found out what they were doing, asked them if they were interested, and in general, it was a hell yes from everybody. And so I put 2 of them to work on the features that needed to be done for the customization, and then one guy helped me do the scaling. And this is just a little note here is, we definitely paid them for their time. I believe in paying people that help you and that work for you. So the question I have for you is, if you get called up by Oprah's people or get called up by the White House, do you have an A-team list that you would start calling to come help you? And if you don't, then you definitely should. You should have a list of those special people you've worked with in the past that you want to work with again. So once we had the A-team, the next step was to have a game plan. And it looks like you can see some of my notes here on this screen because I messed up my talk a little bit. So you have a game plan, and this is how you're going to hit your goal. And so I love checklists and scripts, and you can see in the background behind here, our checklist we used for our game plan part of it. There's a great book called The Score Takes Care of Itself about Bill Walsh, the 49ers coach, and he advocates having a script for every possible scenario that he's going to encounter in a game. And so we followed that advice and scripted out how we thought not only the night or the day would go of the event, but also everything we needed to do up before that. And we created checklists and scripts, and then we went about making sure we were right and executing on those. Another thing we did as part of this game plan that is essential is you need to develop a list of failure scenarios. You know what could go wrong, but you don't know what you don't know. And the only way to handle those is to be prepared for those situations. So we set up a list of pretty much everything that could go wrong, from the internet being unreachable from any location on Earth that day, which is something we couldn't really handle, so we didn't worry about that, but to things like our database being unreachable, if our CDN went down, or all those different things. And then we went about figuring out if it was something that we could control or not, and preparing for that. One of the really interesting places that we didn't know anything about is Wedgies is hosted on Heroku. And we didn't know what happened between Heroku and AWS. So we put that down as a big question mark to learn more about, so we could figure out what we needed to do to make that like the best possible experience. So this is a work in progress, and as we talked to a lot of people over the next couple of weeks, we kept updating this as we found more things to worry about or if we knew that we had something handled. This is important too. You want to talk to your service providers early and often, and we learned a ton and also made some pretty good friends this way. So Heroku gave us some really great recommendations about switching from like their 1 and 2x dynos to using their PX dynos, which are really powerhouses. And they lifted a cap on the number of concurrent dynos we could run. So if you've ever logged into your Heroku account and slid that little slider all the way to the right to the point where it's like going to drain your entire bank account, and all you have to do is hit submit to make it start working, but you hit back instead because you're really scared. They gave us the ability to like slide that thing all the way to the right to the point where it would have drained our bank account. So that was pretty awesome to see that. We use Compose.io for hosting our Mongo database, and we had a lot of support tickets with them and conversations about best practices, and they had some good recommendations as well. And they were super excited that we had this opportunity to work with the White House. Amazon as well for AWS. A big shout out to Angie Perez and Dave Chappelle, who are here in San Francisco in the startup loft. They were huge helps, and they gave us a bunch of checklists that they have of things that we needed to look out for, especially for like the Heroku AWS connection. And I'm glad to share those checklists too if anybody needs it. And what we found like through all of this is like the big unknown point was going to be the elastic load balancers between Amazon and Heroku, which runs inside of Amazon AWS. So over the course of all these conversations, everybody was super excited to help. They were really happy for us, and it was great getting to connect with all of them. And we felt like we needed to let them know, not just from our own perspective, but let them know that they were going to get a huge increase in traffic like during that specific time. So we went back and updated our game plan again with everything we learned. Talking to experts is the next step that you need to do. And there are people in your professional life and maybe even your personal life that can help you with this. We talked to a bunch of DevOps people that work for Riot's League of Legends. They were super helpful in poking holes in our game plan, as well as basically telling us how they handled their own rollouts. Things like they knew that they always had to roll out 2 API servers for every new web server that they put online, based on like all of their load testing. We also upgraded to the premium support on Heroku for this time because we figured if we went down during the State of the Union, nothing else mattered at that point because it would be pretty terrible. So Heroku premium support was super helpful too. We got to talk to a lot of their node experts, and they helped poke holes not only in our game plan but also like in our code as well. Whenever we had like a issue that we thought might be caused by Heroku, they were very helpful in helping us troubleshoot it. So then the next step, after you have your game plan, you have your failure scenarios, you've talked to your experts, is to start trying to hit that goal that we had. And that started with setting up monitoring, because you don't know if you're hitting your goal if you can't see a dashboard, you can't see the score of the game. So we tried to monitor everything that we could. We knew that we had this goal of hitting 120,000 requests per minute, serviced with no errors. And we knew we wanted to, I tried to identify like where the bottlenecks were with slow request times, response times, I mean. And we also wanted to make sure we got a warning when something was going wrong. More importantly, we wanted to get a warning before things went wrong. Any kind of signal that something was slowing down was really important so that we could address it before things just broke. So New Relic was great for measuring error rates and response time. Heroku actually has pretty good tools now for reporting errors like inside their own system. And we use Papertrail for collecting logs, and we had so many logs from all the load testing that we were doing. So next comes load testing. And Load testing, there is the load testing uncertainty principle that you may have learned about in high school chemistry, which is you can't test with a lot of traffic and know how much traffic is being generated at the same time. You just can't trust the load testing services to accurately report how much load they're actually throwing at you. So we use several services, mostly Loader.io, which is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. But due to the uncertainty principle, we also use these other things like Bees with Machine Guns and JMeter and Blitz.io. And when one of these services is generating a lot of load to throw at you, it's doing it through usually one or two pipes of its own. So it's possible that it's also having trouble with throttling or anything like that. So it's really important to monitor from your end and verify that you actually are handling as much traffic as like the load testing service or your scripts report that it's putting out. Fixing the bottlenecks. This is like where you go read blog posts and stuff. If you are Googling load testing because you need to know how to load test, most of the stuff that comes up is going to be this step. And this is, all the things we did here were things like caching API results, tuning database queries, throwing more hardware at it. That's probably my favorite, is throwing more hardware at it, sliding a little Heroku slider up, because that's just fun. Increasing the number of connections like your databases can handle, combining multiple API calls into one call, and also returning less data from an API call, so it's not as big a bottleneck. Your load testing will identify these bottlenecks for you, and it's just up to you to fix those, and basically add them as tasks on there. And every time we fixed a bottleneck, we would go back and run all of our load tests again to see like if we got an increase or if we had actually made things slower. Just really important to keep running those load tests over and over again while you're doing this. So this brings us to game day. So game day was January 20th. We'd checked off almost everything on our game plan up until this, and we had been compiling a game day checklist of things that we needed to do the night before and the day of. So, for example, the day before we contacted Compose.io at their recommendation and opened up a support ticket to get 2 gigabytes of space allocated, so that in case we hit like our max, we wouldn't have to wait for Mongo to pre-allocate another batch or to allocate another space for our data. We also contacted another vendor that we were using for GeoIP stuff and made sure we had enough credits in there. On Tuesday morning of game day, so State of the Union day, things are getting exciting. We did things like we opened up a Heroku support ticket that they asked us to open up to pre-warm the ELBs, the Elastic Load Balancers on Amazon, at 3 p.m., which was like 3 hours before the State of the Union started. We increased the number of dynos we were running to 10. And then we opened up like our dashboards and everything. Actually there's one box on here that I took off because we didn't do it. And it actually ended up being a huge problem that we should have done. Excuse me, sorry. So at 5 p.m. we increased the dynos to 30 PX dynos, which if you're running those for more than a day, it gets really expensive. That was like the kind of scary part, like worrying that I'd go to sleep without turning those back down. And at this point there was a checkbox that I deleted because I made the executive order not to do it. And that was to run a small load test against production. But I was worried because this page was already live on the whitehouse.gov website, and I didn't want to mess anything up there, and I felt like we were prepared. So that's a little foreshadowing for you kids who, again, 6th graders, for you kids who are studying English. Keep an eye on that one here for this next part of the story. So at 5:30 p.m., I jumped on a phone line, they call it a bridge, with the White House, with the rest of the tech team. And that made me feel like I was in 24. Jack Bauer was not on the other line, but Chloe was. And if you can see like that last thing there, decreased dynos at 7 p.m. assuming traffic has decreased. Like that was, make sure we do that one too so we don't end up, being charged for tens of thousands of dollars overnight. All right, go for wedgies. Now it's story time. You can see in this picture here, I'm in the back right, and I'm on the phone with the White House, and the rest of the Wedgies team is around, and actually my wife and kids were there too, watching, having fun. So I dial into the White House, and I'm on the phone with, actually this is one of the great things about this whole thing, is that the word wedgies is now in the Library of Congress because of all these conversations. Like everything that happens under President Obama's watch goes into the Library of Congress. So they're calling out roll call, and we've got people from Twitter, PubNub, Akamai, the White House tech team, the contractors, and Jimmy from Wedgies is on the line. So the State of the Union starts, and the page starts popping in those little units of content, and everything seems to be going okay. There's a couple of issues not related to wedgies at all. And we're sitting there watching like all of our stats that we have pulled up on that TV. Traffic is at a minimal level, nothing's hitting us. And then at that point, they say we're gonna load the first wedgies poll. And they do. And a white box pops up on our screen with no wedgies poll in it. And my heart just drops. Like if anybody's ever broken code in production, like you know how terrible that feels. So I look up at our monitors, and there's no traffic hitting our servers at all. So nothing's broken. There are no errors, there's no traffic, so it's time to figure out what's going on. And about 15 seconds pass, and everybody else notices that there's no wedgies poll in that box either. So I double check everything that I can, and everything seems to be working. DNS resolves, everything is good. And so the project manager for the White House says, basically asks if everything is okay on our end. And I have a pretty good feeling that the problem is around the ELB, the load balancers. And I know that they will finish, if they had to spin up more because of the amount of traffic that hit all at once, that it's going to take about 60 seconds. So I count to 10, and I say, wedgies is good, go for wedgies. And they push another wedgies poll on there, and it loads, and everything's fine. And I take a really deep, deep sigh. I mean, it was really intense there for a minute. But getting to say go for wedgies on the phone with the White House was one of the highlights of my life, for sure. So at that point, wedgies polls, I think they ended up using 20 of them on the page, including, and I still can't believe how incredibly dumb this was of us, but awesome at the same time, including a feature that we had never used anywhere else. We rolled out this quiz feature because they wanted it. We never tested it on anybody else's site or with anybody else. So it went live to basically 88,000 people per minute at that night. So that was a lot of fun. So the kind of moral of the story here is we had a good idea of what went wrong, and there was really nothing we could do to fix it. And sometimes you just have to say, F it, and push the button. And the worst that was going to happen was that they wouldn't push any more of the wedgies polls live. So it really felt like I had no option other than to say, go for it. And it turned out to be the right call in that case. So if you remember what our goal was, it was to hit, be able to support 120,000 requests per minute. And this is just a screenshot of part of the night where we were running at 30,000 requests per minute with pretty decent response times there. We ended up only, according to the White House, they reported that we peaked at 88,000 concurrent users per minute. So we ended up over-preparing by quite a bit. So we ended up having great performance the entire night. We only had one 500 error that entire night running on 30 servers. And over 2 million people loaded the page with wedgies polls on it, and 40% of them ended up voting. So we considered it to be a huge success. And all of that was over basically just 1 hour of the live stream that people were paying attention to this page. The last step is don't forget to celebrate. I still can't believe that we were able to work with the White House on such like an important project, and it's really important to take the time to celebrate with your team afterwards, and basically establish folklore for yourselves about that time that you did something amazing. One other thing I just wanted to back up here and point out is, it was an incredibly stressful moment, but I had my kids there because I also believe in celebrating with family. If you can share these kind of wins with your family, that's even better. They got kind of bored towards the end though, so like kids do. So the goal of this talk has been to provide a framework for how you can approach scaling your systems, as not really like getting into the weeds on all the technical things. Every stack is different, from your service providers to the language you use to even your architecture. So, but if you approach scaling in a mindful way, using like game plans and checklists, and using your A team, and identifying what you don't know, and being prepared, it's possible to, in the course of a very short amount of time, scale your system up to handle a lot of traffic. So here is the feedback slide. Appreciate everybody listening today. If you have feedback, feel free to text it there. You can also hit me up on Twitter, or my email address that's cut off on the bottom is jimmy@wedgies.com. Give wedgies.com a try for like the next time you need to do polling, like on your website or inside your app. And if what I described sounds like an awesome adventure, we are also hiring full stack engineers right now. I can say that what's next on the docket for us is we're actually working with the UN to do something that's very similar. I'm also glad to answer questions about anything here at Signal if you want more like in-depth answers on things, or how we actually negotiated the White House deal. I'm glad to talk about that either here or in a dark bar somewhere surrounded by anchor steams. And that's the end. Thank you very much.